Greetings. Welcome to the DragonCon Urban Fantasy Track author interview series. And today I am joined by the wonderful Carrie Vaughn. Carrie, thank you so much for joining me today and permitting me to ask you a whole bunch of questions. It's great to see you again. It's been several years now, and it's just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy we were able to make this work.
Yes, all other things aside, we did it. We pulled it off. Now, the first question I always ask people in these interviews is, did you read fantasy, sci-fi literature as a child or young adult? Did you get started young?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like I was very lucky. Both of my parents are science fiction and fantasy readers, more science fiction than fantasy. But I feel like I grew up in this glorious time where we watched Star Trek reruns. And I was about 5 or 6 years old when Star Wars came out, all through the 80s, which I feel like was this excellent golden age for, science fiction and fantasy on TV and the movies. I grew up watching the Super Friends and Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk and Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers. Like, that's everything that we watched on TV. But I also had all the books. My mom had all the Heinlein juveniles. I discovered Ray Bradbury and Arthur C. Clarke, Robin McKinley, one of my favorite fantasy authors. Except for this brief foray into horse books, I did the horse book thing as a kid as well. I read all the Black Stallion books, all of Marguerite Henry, every horse book I could get my hands on. So except for like that genre, almost everything I read was science fiction and fantasy. So yeah, I come by it very honestly. I pretty much, that's almost all that I consumed.
I know what you mean about the horse books because I went through that as well.
Yes.
Yes. We'll have to confer about that later.
Yeah, I didn't. I was too old for like the Saddle Club. Like there was this whole
right.
Bunch of like series that came out in the 80s and stuff, but I had kind of aged out of it by that point. So yeah, I didn't quite get all of it, but yeah, there was a lot.
Right. Yeah, it seems as though those ones that you're speaking about that came later were, they were an offshoot of some of the earlier ones. Probably some of those authors are the ones who were, like us as kids reading the earlier stuff.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Now, I know that you were a lit major, and what was your area of specialty, or, what did you particularly enjoy studying and reading?
Yeah, I had a couple. I had a lot. I had several areas that I really enjoyed, and that's part of why I never went on for a PhD, because they make you pick something.
Oh,
like,
I know.
To get a PhD, you have to pick a thing, and that's all you do. And I couldn't handle just picking one thing. The things I really loved that I probably took the most classes in were Victorian literature, especially Victorian genre literature. In grad school, I had a great professor who taught classes in things like Victorian horror and Gothic. So that was great. I had a great time because you can really see the roots of the modern genre in that era.
Right.
I also love Renaissance poetry, Elizabethan poetry, the whole English, the second half of the 16th century, starting from Thomas Wyatt and ending up with John Donne, and everything in the middle there. I'm not sure why I love that era of poetry so much, except I think you can see the authors establishing modern English as a language. Like that's the transition from like Chaucer's English to modern English. And you can see, the evolution of the poets, in this very kind of concise stretch of time. The way English looked at the beginning of the 16th century versus the end of the 16th century is very different. And I love seeing that transition. So yeah, that's another area that I really enjoy.
I hadn't really thought about it that way, but you're right, because so many people still talk about that era as, being difficult to read, more, but not, maybe not realizing that it does serve as that kind of a transition. So yeah, that's great. Now, what was the very first work that you had published? I'm have an idea that I think I know what it is, but it was a short story, as I recall. But can you tell us what it was and a little bit about it?
It depends on what you count as being published, because there's
Ah,
of course, there's like I worked on the college newspaper. So I had a bunch of stuff published in the college newspaper, the college literary magazine. I had a few things published. But as far as like, oh, and Military Lifestyle magazine ran a fiction contest that I won in like 1994, and they published my story there. But it's funny because it's mainstream, like it's a totally mainstream literary story with no science fiction elements, and it's in this non-science fiction magazine, so it's this total
right.
outlier. But yeah, it was a story I wrote in college, and it got published there. But as far as like science fiction and fantasy, in a publication that I got paid for, as a professional writer, the first thing that got published was in Tailbones magazine, a story called "The Girl with the Pre-Raphaelite Hair."
Yeah, that's a great
Um,
title. I love that.
oh, thank you, thank you. And interestingly, that wasn't actually the first one I sold, but the first one that I sold was published second, just because of the publishing schedules and how that worked out. But yeah, the first one to actually appear in print was the Tailbones magazine
Yeah,
story.
that's great. But yeah, what a title to have under your belt as being the very first.
I
So,
have pretty good luck with titles. Sometimes it takes me a while to come up with them, but if I
right.
give it a little time, I can usually come up with a pretty good one.
Yeah, I'm sure that I've heard different things from different authors in terms of how how they come up with titles or
Mhm.
how difficult it is, or do they do it in the very beginning, or do they wait until later? But yeah, that one is great. So now let's get to our wonderful Kitty. Let's see, there's the
Yay.
first book, and I then it's the kind of this running joke throughout the whole series, a werewolf named Kitty,
Yep.
which I love, that even when people meet her for the first time, they're like, really? I mean, not everybody, but some people are like, yeah, what's that about?
Mhm.
The name. But I can't imagine that there is anyone who will be watching this interview that does not know what the series is about. But could you give us just like your very brief elevator pitch overview of what this 14 book series is about?
It's about a werewolf named Kitty who hosts a talk radio advice show for the supernaturally disadvantaged. Um,
That's a good way to
and
put
that's
it.
it.
I like that.
That's my elevator pitch. Yeah, it's about a talk radio show for supernatural creatures, um, because the regular talk radio shows just would not be able to help them with their problems.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that
So,
and
though I discovered something recently. So, years, oh gosh, time has no meaning now, but a
oh
couple of years
yeah,
ago, the new short story collections, The Immortal Conquistador and Kitty's Mixtape, came out, which kind of pulled together some of the short stories and things.
yeah.
Yay! Oh, excellent, thank you. So something I discovered, like poking around and reading book reviews and things of it, there's a whole new generation of urban fantasy readers who hadn't
Mhm.
encountered Kitty before. And that was really interesting to me, like that enough time had passed that there's a whole group of new readers.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic, but it was really interesting watching them kind of when the new books came out, just going, oh, what's this Kitty thing about? I should look into that. And it's like, yes, you should.
Yes, you should. You
Right.
definitely should. Yes, because we all love Kitty.
Oh, thank
Yes,
you.
the a few of these I don't have paper. I have e-copies of rather than hard copies. But yeah, the mixtape one. That's great. Now, you aside from maybe Kitty and a couple of the very main characters, did you have a favorite secondary recurring character that you really enjoyed writing that was particularly fun to you?
I think Rick the
Okay.
vampire is probably my favorite to write. I've written more about other characters. Like I think at this point, I've probably written more about Cormick, who's very interesting and has his own things going on. But the thing I've found with Rick is incorporating his whole history. He's 500 years old. He's got this massive history, and I've kind of been able to use him as this window into the history of the region where I live, the West and Southwest United States, which is where he spent most of that time. We sort of, there's kind of the trope of the vampire who's lived for hundreds of years and is all knowing and all wise and has all this experience. And Rick is so interesting because he doesn't actually have a ton of experience. He's mostly lived in the same places, and he's really kind of a homebody. But he also, represents this whole colonial history of the Western U.S. And I kind of love that. And, it wasn't something I set out to do, but once I realized it was happening, it's like, yeah, this is something I'm really interested, in pursuing. So I get to do that with him. I kind of get to do a lot that I don't necessarily get to do with some of the other characters.
Yeah. And the cool thing about Rick is that he doesn't purport to know everything.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that kind of, that tragic, I'm so old and
he's a very unvampire-like vampire.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the part of the point with him. Yeah. That he's having a good time. He's fine. He wants to help people. He wants to be left alone. He doesn't want to get involved in the whole vampire politics thing. And so, yeah, I have a lot of fun with him.
Yeah, well, as a reader, I can say I enjoy it very much. I think he's a fabulous character.
Excellent.
Now, from your perspective, what or who do you think was the most dangerous foe that Kitty ever faced? I mean, we could have go ahead.
Definitely. I mean, Dux Bellorum, Roman, who is her antagonist for most of the series, and I'm thinking about it now, like he's not the most dangerous, like objectively, because he's got his boss, Lightman, who it turns out is Lucifer. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoilers.
He's Lucifer. Like he's actually Lucifer, and Kitty gets on his bad side without realizing that she's getting on his bad side. But the one, so I mean, clearly he's the most dangerous antagonist, but she only meets him, I think, 2 or 3 times over the course, like just in the last book. I think she doesn't meet him until then. So yeah, Roman is the one who keeps popping up, and I think that if she had to pick, Roman's the one she's most worried about.
Yeah, and rightly so. I mean, he's and the fact that he's kind of the boogeyman, even for other vampires, the ones who aren't on his side anyway, is interesting. So,
he's competent. He's not overly emotional. He doesn't get dramatic. He's just very quietly doing his thing. And for me, that's always like a little more frightening than like the flashy villains. There's plenty of flashy villains out there who are, I'm thinking of like villains in the MCU. It's Roman is more like your Thanos. He's there. He's got a plan. He's not going to let anything stop him. And he thinks he's right, and he's doing what he's doing, and that can be so much more frightening.
Right, and from the moment he shows up, we know that he is going to be, that he is formidable, because he's not trying to be scary. He is scary.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
So just kind of there. Now, in Kitty Rocks the House, Kitty herself kind of all of a sudden feels the burden of responsibility, but she manages to work through it and overcomes those fears and anxieties. I mean, it's because the character Darren, I believe his name is, that was trying to influence, or he's trying to disrupt things and take over the pack and do all this. But then she has all these burdens that seem to be hitting her at the same time. And she's kind of like, I don't know if I can do this. She's really hit with self-doubt, I think, more than she is in, at any other time. And to what do you attribute the change? What do you think was for her that made it so that she got over that and said, okay, this is, this is what I can do?
Yeah, I have to think for a minute because it's been a while since I've thought about that book. Yeah. And when I was first starting out, I'd read interviews with Stephen King and thing where he would talk about, I don't really remember writing that book. And I'd just be appalled. Like, how can you remember not writing a book? But now that I've written 23, 24 novels myself, it's like, oh yeah, I get that. Yeah. But yeah, Kitty Rocks the House. I can talk about the development of the character over the whole series, because that's something I did really specifically, that Kitty's circle of responsibility expands throughout the series. So it's almost every book, the things that she's responsible for
keeps getting bigger. Yeah.
and that circle keeps going further and further out until the last book in the series is Kitty Saves the World, and that's how far her reach has gotten at that point. Oh gosh, you've got them all. This is fantastic.
I do. I have them all, yeah.
Yeah. And so the balance is, of course, that as her responsibility is increasing, her power is increasing. She's getting stronger and she's figuring things out. And it's so interesting that you pick that book in particular as an inflection point, because I think that's a moment where it doesn't balance out, that maybe her responsibility has expanded further than her abilities at that point. So she's on a pretty good, pretty steady progress. First she has to learn to take care of herself, and then she learns to take care of her friends. And then she's taking care of the pack. And then she's asked to be a spokesperson for werewolves that she doesn't know. And so she's, I see Kitty Goes to War, where she's called in to help with the werewolf soldiers. As being a big moment for her, because it's like, okay, she's an authority now. She's an expert that people are coming to and saying, hey, you have to help. And then Kitty Rocks the House kind of brings that back. It's like, okay, now we're back with her pack, and things have changed. And, her attention has been out on these bigger problems, and now she has to kind of bring it in and then balance those two things together. And yeah, those are skills, and learning new skills and learning new abilities, and how to talk to people and how to deal with things. And my thing with Kitty has always been that she's pretty nonviolent. If she can find a diplomatic solution, right, she will always go for the diplomatic solution. And yet she can fight when she needs to. Right. She calls on allies. That's the other thing about Kitty that I really wanted to bring out through the series, is that it's not necessarily, her powers aren't necessarily in herself. It's in her ability to draw in all of these other people, her ability to make these coalitions. So, even if she doesn't have a skill, she knows somebody over there who has a skill.
Right.
Yeah. And for me, that was a more interesting story for me, kind of a more interesting ethos. So yeah, I think, Kitty Rocks the House is almost the moment before you get the final stretch for the last couple of books in the series.
Right. Yeah.
If you sort of divide the series up into like mini stories, like that's the last one before the last push to go confront Roman. So yeah, I think that is a moment where she's having to kind of consolidate and reconsider, and figure out some new skills and figure out what she actually wants.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
Yeah, she gets a chance there to kind of maybe say no, and that she doesn't want to be in charge anymore, and she decides that no, yeah, she is on the right path and she needs to keep going.
Yeah, it's got to be, or it had to have been this difficult moment to decide, to decide, not only can I do this, but do I want to? And ultimately she makes the decision that we all, are glad that she makes, but it doesn't come without cost either. So, that always, I think, is also important.
Yeah. Now, I think it points out that her path isn't inevitable. Like she's kind of
Right.
having to choose and re-choose her path over and over again throughout the course of the series.
Right. It's not as though it
Mhm.
was, you know, clearly defined as being just one thing from the very beginning. So,
Right.
uh, these little real life happens to creep in. So now, one of the other things that I wanted to ask you about is that all of the Kitty books that are about her, I mean, told from her perspective, are first person. And this any of the other stories or Low Midnight that are told from other characters' perspectives are, you know, they're, and it's clearly their perspectives, but not
Mm-hmm.
first person. uh, was this for you, was this a way to differentiate, since they're taking place in Kitty's world? You wanted to make sure that there was a differentiation for the reader,
Yeah.
to make sure that they understood that it was a different perspective. And I just wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely that Kitty's always first person.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's her voice, and yeah, a big part of it is a matter of voice. Making sure that Cormick sounds different and that Rick sounds different, and using a different point of view, third person rather than first person, is kind of an easy way to do that. An easy way to make sure that the books just sound different. The character just sounds different. So yeah, that was definitely part of it, but also, yeah, to signal to the reader that, yeah, this is different. This isn't. We're not in Kitty's head for this one. So
Right, we might be in her world, but we're
yeah.
not. Yeah, but it's a little bit different. um, and you've mentioned Cormick several times, and of course we have to mention him. But what I wanted to find out was, how do you see some of the major differences between Kitty and Cormick slash Amelia, or I will admit I have begun to refer to them in my head as Cormelia.
Yeah.
Um, and what do you think are the major differences, and what ways do you think that they're the most alike?
The major difference that has always kind of been my guiding principle when I'm writing about Cormick versus writing about Kitty is that he's not a talker. Kitty is a talker.
Yeah.
Cormick is not a talker. In fact, when Low Midnight, the book that's told from Cormick's point of view, came out, I got asked a couple of times about gender, like, writing from the point of view of a man versus the point of view of a woman. And I thought about that, and it's like, that wasn't the thing that was foremost in my mind. The thing that was foremost in my mind is, like, Cormick doesn't talk, and
Right,
Kitty
right.
does. And so when I'm writing about Cormick, I'm always cutting back on the dialogue. Whereas with Kitty, I'm always adding to it. It's like, no, she's talking. She's a radio DJ. Of course she's going to talk.
Right.
Whereas Cormick's like, yeah, Cormick's going to stay quiet if he can. So it seems really superficial, but it turns out it's a really guiding principle for both of those characters, that he's not going to talk unless he has to. And going through his dialogue, it's rare to see him ever say like more than a sentence or more than a few words at a time. I think other ways that they're similar, they're not very similar, but I think they're both very loyal.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be why they get along so well, is that they both have a sense of honor and a sense of loyalty, and this desire to protect the things that are important to them. The difference between them being is Kitty's world is expansive. She has a ton of friends and a ton of family, and she cares about them all. Whereas I think Cormick doesn't have a lot of friends, only has a
Right.
couple of family members. But I think he's going to protect them that much more, because of that, because that he doesn't have a lot of people. So the people he does have are that much more important. But I think that's kind of where they line up, is just how much they need to protect the people around them, who they care about.
Yeah, that makes sense. That would have, I mean, that was my thought too, was that they both have this great sense of loyalty. Now, do you have a favorite installment from the series? One that either you enjoyed the most as you were writing it, or one that, I know it's like asking you to choose your favorite child, but or the one that you were most impressed with the final product. I know that while things are being written is one thing, and when they're finished, you're like,
yeah, yeah. And yeah, it is a tough one because, particularly one of the things I tried to do for myself as I was writing the series is kind of have a different mission statement with each book. Like this is the book that is going to be the screwball comedy. Kitty and the Dead Man's Hand when they're in Las Vegas. It's like, this is going to be the screwball comedy. This one's going to be the political thriller. I had kind of a thing that I wanted to do with each of them. And so, my feelings about them are whether or not I accomplished, the assignment that I gave myself for those books. So in some ways, like they all have something that I really love about them. The one I think that I had kind of the clearest assignment for myself and that I'm still really pleased with how it came out is Kitty's House of Horrors.
Okay.
The one where they're stuck in I call it kind of my reverse horror movie because it's the characters are all stuck in a cabin in the woods and they're getting killed off one by one, but it's all of the supernatural monster characters who are stuck in the cabin and getting killed off one by one, which is not how those things typically go. So, so yeah, I had a lot of things I wanted to do with horror movie tropes in that book, and I think I did okay. I think I'm still pleased with it. I still have people who say it's the scariest book in the series, which I love. Like I love hearing that because that was the point. That was what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I get why they would feel that way. Saying that it was the scariest because there are. I mean, what you're dealing with at that point is that the bad guys are humans.
Yes.
That are truly the monsters, and you did accomplish it for sure to have to instill in us that fear. And the thing I felt when I was reading it is that these people are getting picked off one by one. Now I knew Kitty wasn't going to be, but I mean, really at that point you didn't know who else was going to survive. Yeah. Okay, who's next?
Oh, good. Yeah, and I wanted, like, I didn't want just a straight slasher story. I didn't want there to be a sense of just gratuitous violence. I wanted it. Everybody did the right thing. Like everybody did everything they could to survive, and it wasn't enough. Because to me, that's like far scarier than just having a ravening monster, slasher monster. It's the bad guys are really smart and the good guys are really smart. And the protagonists and the antagonists are all doing exactly the right thing. And that makes it even scarier, because they're not idiots. They're not dying because they're being dumb. They're dying because the bad guys are just that good, just that competent. So yeah. I very much had a sense of, I didn't want people to know who was gonna survive and who was, if anyone was gonna survive by the end of the story.
Right. Was Kitty going to be all by herself, or whatever? And I will say I'm glad that Grant managed to Odysseus Grant managed to live through it.
Yes.
As well as Tina and Anastasia but it was here I just gave away a bunch of spoilers again. I'll post that a warning about that in the notes
and the books have been out for a while now. Like that's what's hard to manage sometimes. It's like, when is the expiration date on spoilers? Yeah, I think Odysseus Grant is the one character I get the most requests for a character I should do more with that I haven't done very much with.
Right, and he is very intriguing because you know some of what he can do, but we don't know all of his abilities. I'm quite sure we have not been shown everything he can do. And so he's got this air of mystery that, that any of them can have, but he seems to have it a bit more, I think, than some of the others. And he ended up being a really good friend to Kitty, which was nice. Yeah. So. And I just wanted to put in a little plug for one that I really enjoy. I love them all, but I really enjoyed Steals the Show.
Yeah,
because of it being in England.
Yep.
which is my well, it's not my secret goal in life. It's like, okay, I need to go there someday, and it's been a lifelong goal. But because of the Ned character and his connection to Shakespeare and all that, so that was, to me, that was fun. I enjoyed that. But
that was pure indulgence for me, because London is my favorite city outside the U.S. probably. I love London. I love Shakespeare. I'm an English major,
right, of course, yeah.
But yeah, like I got to do a lot in that book that was just to make me happy.
Right. Well, I enjoyed it thoroughly, so
excellent.
I'm on board with that. Now, was there, since this was such a long running series, and you do still have some things related to the series coming out told in that world, was there something that occurred early on in the series, something that you had happen that maybe if several books later you wished, well, no, oh, dang it, why did I kill off that person? Or why did I have them do this or move to that place? Was there anything like that happened for you?
Not really.
Good.
And again, well, it's, I kind of don't think about it, because I'm sure I could come up with stuff, but there's nothing I can do about it at this point. I can't, the series is written, like, it's all, there's nothing I can do to change it. And I kind of don't want to, like, I'd rather move forward. I think, there are so many loose ends, and
right.
I introduced so many characters who were maybe there for just one or two books, and then I didn't do anything else with. And I think that's one of my regrets, is like, I wish I could have done more with some of those characters. I go back sometimes and it's like, oh yeah, I was really really interested in those two. There's definitely more backstory there, and what could I do with them? And there's just not enough room and not enough time. I just couldn't do everything. But yeah, there's TJ's brother, who comes up at one point. Oh gosh, I'm not going to remember. Kitty Raises Hell, I think, is the book he shows up in. And
right. I think that's right.
And I get asked about him all the time, like what's up with him, and it's like, I know, I want to find out what's up with him, right? So my regrets aren't about like things I wish I had done differently, but more, there's just a ton of characters and a ton of things and a few loose ends that I didn't necessarily deal with, that I could probably go back and deal with.
Well, there you go, more short stories, because we have I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, it's just, but my list of projects right now is so long. Like, there's just so much I want to write, and I just can't do it all. So we'll see. I mean, never say never.
There you go. Now, you do have the couple of short story collections. We have Kitty's Greatest Hits, which came out while the series was still going on.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had Kitty's Mixtape, which I showed off once before, that even though a number of the stories take place, throughout the sequence of the series, they didn't come out until after the series was completed. So that must have been an interesting way to have to approach writing things. It's like these little, let's insert this one. Here's we're going to tell like what happened to Ben in Vegas. Because that was great, because I kept thinking, what happened to Ben? And then I was like, oh yeah, there's a short story. Okay, I'm going to read that, which I did right after the book. So, but that must have been a little bit of a challenge to approach from that perspective.
So those stories were written over the course of almost 10 years.
Well, okay.
So I didn't write all the stories in one sitting. A lot of them are reprints. A lot of them appeared in various magazines and anthologies earlier. I think there's 3 or 4 original stories in Mixtape that I did write just for that one. Well, and what happened to Ben in Vegas is funny, because I wrote that when I wrote the novel, Kitty and the Dead Man's Hand, because I wanted to know. It's like, okay, what actually did happen? So I wrote that then and kind of tucked it away, and then pulled it out for this. It wasn't, most of them I was writing them over the course of several years.
Okay.
Yeah, the one, And I always, most of the short stories I write set in that world are because I want to find out something. You know, it's something that
Right.
doesn't fit in the novels. I want to know the backstory of this one character. I'm trying to think which one it appears in, but you know, in Kitty Goes to Washington, we meet Fritz, a German werewolf who it turns out. So it turns out there were Nazi werewolves. This is a real thing. They weren't werewolves. It's the name that was given to after the Allied occupation, the Nazis who remained and tried to kind of foment rebellion against the Allies. They were called the werewolves. And a friend told me about that, and it's like, okay, I have to do something with that.
Right.
So you know, we see him as an old man in Kitty Goes to Washington, but I wanted his backstory. I wanted to see him as the young man he was during the war and what had happened to him. So most of the short stories are things like that. It's like, I need this little slice of information. I need to know what that story was about. And that's where the short stories come from. And I think I really love that I was able to pull them into the couple of collections there so that people can have them all in one place.
Oh, I agree. And I think it's wonderful to have, you know, that to look at in addition to the novels. And you know, and you could read them. You don't have to necessarily read them in order because they're still going to make sense. But anyway, yes, they are a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
And for anybody who doesn't have the mixtape, you need to find out what happened to Ben in Vegas. Just saying. Now, in addition to the Kitty series, you took, you know, side trips into many other novels over the course of even while you were still writing the Kitty series. And in 2010, we have Discord's Apple.
Yeah.
And and what can you tell our viewers again? What is your elevator pitch for this one?
So in Discord's Apple, it's kind of a near future. The main character discovers a storehouse of magical items in her family's basement that she is about to become the heir of. And it turns out Hera still wants that golden apple from the Judgment of Paris that started the Trojan War. So so Evie inherits this magical storehouse, and strange people start showing up wanting things from it. So a lot of Greek mythology, near future, apocalyptic, everything.
Yes. Yeah. Discord being the key, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very a lot of that. And then in the same year, in 2010, you took made a foray into YA.
Voices of Dragons.
Voices of Dragons. What can you tell our viewers about that one?
I'm having to remember these elevator pitches. I have elevator pitches for everything, but I don't remember them. So Voices of Dragons is about an alternate world where the Cold War happened between dragons and humanity. That dragons are real and they have a territory basically where Canada is now. And my main character sort of accidentally becomes friends with a dragon because she kind of sort of accidentally crossed the border when she wasn't supposed to. But she made friends. Yeah, oops. So many stories start out this way. So and so did something they were not supposed to do, and now here we are with the consequences. But it's about her and her dragon friend Artegal have to prevent war. They have to try to stop a war from breaking out between people and dragons.
And if you're going to have a friend to help you do that, it seems as though having a dragon friend would work out as a good idea. That's the one you want on your side. Yes.
Yep.
Now, in 2011, you had another YA that came out called Steel, and that one I don't have a hard copy of, so I can't show everybody. But what can you tell us? Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, in that one, my main character, Jill, is she's a teenage competitive fencer who is not doing very well in her competitions. And on a family vacation to the Bahamas, she sort of accidentally gets thrown back in time to the golden age of the pirates. So she ends up on a pirate ship in the early 18th century and has to learn to sword fight for real to defend her own life. So.
Yeah, that's a very interesting concept. I'm sure that people would, hopefully not identify too closely, but find that especially with the whole pirate, pirates are always popular, right? So
yeah. Well, that's kind of where that one came from. Is I saw a certain installment in a certain pirate movie franchise and decided I could do better.
Oh, there you go.
I could write a better pirate story, and so I did.
There you go. Now, next we have a couple. There was actually a duology. I have both of those, and After the Golden Age and Dreams of the Golden Age, and they came out a few years apart, 2011 and then 2014. But those are a very unique story too. Not that the others aren't. I'm just saying it's a unique take on that genre is what I meant. So what can you tell our viewers about that?
They're superhero novels. It's about a superhero world, superhero city, but the main character, at least the main character in After the Golden Age, and she's one of the main characters in Dreams of the Golden Age, she is the daughter of the city's greatest superheroes, but she has no powers of her own. And instead she is an accountant. She became an accountant. And
I had forgotten that was her job. Yeah.
Yeah. She's a forensic accountant, which is a thing that exists that I love. I discovered the concept of forensic accounting. My mother's an accountant, and I worked in an accounting office for a long time. So the idea of having accountant heroes is very near and dear to my heart. There was a point where my mom got a bookkeeping job, and before long discovered that the previous bookkeeper had been embezzling a lot of money, and so my mom ended up getting involved with the police and testifying, and it was not fun for my mom at all. but I discovered forensic accounting, which is the accountants are always going to get you. Like if you're contemplating some kind of bad guy thing, don't do it, because the accountants will get you. And that's what their job is. So it's a superhero novel where my main character is a forensic accountant with no superpowers. And I tell that to people, that the main character is the daughter of superheroes, but she has no superpowers. And they're like, oh, but she gets superpowers by the end. And it's like, nope, she does not get superpowers by the end. Because
being an accountant is her superpower. Yeah.
Being an accountant is her superpower. And that was a trope that was really important for me to work with. Because it's, I'm thinking of Sky High, which is a great movie, about the child of superheroes who's very worried because he doesn't have superpowers yet. And yes, he gets superpowers by the end of the story. And that seems to be how that usually goes. But as you might have gathered, I frequently decide to write stories to do the opposite of whatever is out there, that I will write things because something bothers me or pisses me off. And so a lot of After the Golden Age and Dreams of the Golden Age is my take on superheroes, and things that bother me about the genre. I just went and did it my way instead.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, Dreams of the Golden Age. So, After the Golden Age is Celia, who does not have a great relationship with her parents because they secretly wish that she had superpowers and she doesn't. And there's all kinds of trauma and stress. Oh yeah. That's her backstory is that in her active teenage rebellion was to join, to become a henchman of her parents' arch nemesis. So she spent a couple of months being the arch nemesis hench person. And that did not go well either. But Dreams of the Golden Age is Celia now has daughters of her own. She now has 2 children of her own, one of whom has superpowers and is hiding it from Celia. So it's the person, the intergenerational kind of story.
Right. You're talking about
that she was a rebellious child, and now she has a rebellious child of her own, and we get to see her try to navigate that.
It's, yeah, you hear these stories, that people say, "Oh, just wait till your kid is or wait till they do this to you," and
Yep. Yep.
so okay. And uh, after that, in 2017, we have Martians Abroad.
Mm-hmm.
And what can you tell our viewers about that one?
That is about a brother and sister, Polly and Charles, who are Martian colonists. Well, they've grown up on Mars. They're, I think, the third generation to have been born and grown up on the Martian colony. And then their mother decides she's going to send them back to Earth for boarding school. And they hate it, or Polly hates it. Polly, my main character. Yeah, so it's my two Martians who are exchange students on Earth, and they have adventures, as you do.
Yes, that would certainly happen, I'm sure. So yes. Now, also the same year as that one, you had Bannerless come out, which won the Philip K. Dick Award. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank
And
you.
which that's amazing. And its sequel, The Wild Dead, came out the year after. I do have a hard copy of that.
Oh, yeah.
I have an e-copy of the other one, so I can't hold that up. And what can you tell us about that one?
Bannerless and The Wild Dead are post-apocalyptic murder mysteries. So it's set about 80 years after the end of civilization as we know it, through various mechanisms, several of which we've been living through over the last couple of years ourselves. So that's
Right.
very strange to be kind of living through the actual prologue to the actual novel that I wrote.
Yeah, really.
And, economic collapse, disease, climate change, climate disasters, things burning down, but that's way in the past. And that's one of the things I wanted to do is not write about the apocalypse, write about two generations after the apocalypse, and that showing that things will survive. Like we're not going to be wiped out. Something's going to survive. It's just not going to look like what we have now. So rather than write a book about an apocalypse, I wanted to use the apocalypse as the setting. And writing a murder mystery, it turns out, is a really great way to explore setting. So the murder mystery is the story, and then the setting, kind of becomes the backdrop against which, the very familiar, murder mystery structure takes place. And it turns out that was a really good way to do that, both for myself for writing it and also for the reader, because we all know murder mysteries, and Enid is the investigator, which is a very familiar, you've got your cop, your investigator character, solving a murder. The only thing that's unfamiliar is the setting, but that was such a good way it's such a useful way to draw people into the setting, by giving them this very familiar structure. So I had a really good time writing those books.
Yeah. And the fact that they don't have, with the collapse of civilization as we know it, they wouldn't have access to the same kinds of forensic tools that they would have, previously. So that adds a little bit to it. And I've got to ask, you also won an award for the short story Amaryllis. Which I have a feeling that Bannerless kind of grew from the idea of Amaryllis, and I wanted to ask about that, and that's a good story as well. I mean, congratulations on that award. So.
It won the Washington Area Science Fiction Association Small Press Award, and it was also a finalist for the Hugo Award. It didn't win the Hugo, but it was a finalist for it. And that was, I do this a lot, I'll get an idea, and if I'm not sure if the idea is going to work, I'll write a short story about it first.
Let it simmer for a while.
Yeah. So, just let's try out some ideas. Let's see how it goes. So, the idea of this culture where you have to have permission to have children is kind of the basic underlying, there's more to it than that. This culture is about conserving resources and managing resources in such a way that everybody has enough, which means, population is a resource in some respects. so that's kind of the core idea, is that this culture, you have to have permission, and you were granted permission by getting a banner. It's a symbol that you have proven that you have enough resources and the ability to take care of children, and so you get a banner. So Amaryllis was the first story where I introduced that concept. And the main character in that one is someone who was born without a banner, someone who's born outside of, her mother did not have permission to have her. But she's there, she's still there, and she's doing her best, and she's got to figure things out. And, she's got her family with her. And that story is kind of like her learning that she does have value, and that her perspective on things is skewed because of this thing that happened in her past. And so that short story is mostly her like learning to think better of herself, learning about her own value, which is a short story idea. Like that's a pretty small, concise idea. So that was definitely a short story. But of course it introduces all kinds of questions, about how this culture works and everything. And so that's where the novel came from. A few years later, I wrote a short story about the investigator who investigated that character's mother. So it's kind of a prequel to Amaryllis in some ways. And that investigator, Enid, I wrote the short story where Enid was the main character, and I loved her to bits. She was such a great character. And that's when I thought, I need a novel. She needs to have a novel. And, not about the culture, but about Enid's jobs. Like, what are the cases that Enid goes to investigate? So, in some ways, it's kind of a police procedural, but set in this very different setting.
Cool. Now you then took another your next group of novellas here were the Ghost of Sherwood and the Heirs of Locksley, and probably people can get an idea of what those are about just from the title. But can you give us just a brief little comment about those? They're fun.
They're about Robin Hood's children. Yeah, that's an easy one. The Ghost of Sherwood, we meet Robin and Marion's three children, Mary, John, and Eleanor. And then in the Heirs of Locksley, so the thing I discovered is that assuming you take like the Robin Hood of the era of the old Errol Flynn movie, so it's Prince John and King John. And like I could give this whole thing about Robin Hood and what historical period it's actually set in, or should it be set in? Because it turns out it's a whole big thing. It's a whole big debate. But my question about the Errol Flynn movie has always been, in a couple of years, King Richard dies, and then Prince John actually becomes King of England.
Right.
And Robin Hood, Baron of Locksley, is going to have to deal with him. And how does that work out? Well, how that works out is in like 15 years, you get the Magna Carta, where the barons of England rose up and forced King John to sign this document giving landowners their rights because he was being a tyrant, and of course Robin Hood is going to be involved in that. So that was kind of my core idea, but I really wanted to write about the children. So in Heirs of Locksley, King John dies and his son is underage. His son is only 9 years old when he dies, and he becomes King of England. He becomes Henry III. So he's just like a year or two younger than what I set up for Robin Hood's kids. So it's Robin Hood's children and King John's son, King Henry III, get together and solve crimes.
If only that had been what was really going on. That would have been cool.
So I once again, I have the potential to write more stories using these characters if I want to, because it tickled me to death that King Henry III was underage. He was a kid, and he would have been about the same age as Robin and Marion's children. So why not get them together? Why not make them be friends? And they're hanging out and they're having adventures, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you're the author. You can do what you want.
I have so much fun. Like this is my secret, is I come up with this crazy stuff that I just really love and want to do more with, and that's I get to do that.
Yeah. It's your playground now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Now in 2021, Questland came out again, one that I have an e-copy of, and that was yet again kind of a different approach for you. So, what can you tell our viewers about Questland?
Yeah, I'm always doing different things. Yeah, we're just going through all of them. This is great.
Yeah.
Questland is about Questland is about a high-tech LARP that goes horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah, does it ever?
It goes very wrong. So yeah, it's about a tech. No, well, it's actually it's once again like that's the setting and the main character. My main character is an English professor who gets called for a special job, and it turns out the special job is that this tech billionaire genius has built a theme park on an island, and he's trying to prove that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But it's much like a certain dinosaur franchise. Things got out of control for various reasons. And so he's sending in a mercenary squad. And then my main character, Addie, is hired to be the guide, to guide the mercenary squad through Fantasyland, essentially.
Yes, and it is a lot of a lot of fun, but yet it's got its serious aspects to it, of course, but because there is some mayhem, and I won't give away too many things, but in any case, I think people would enjoy it.
Yeah, it's kind of a book that is custom made for gamers and sci-fi geeks. There's so many references. As I was writing it, or leading up to before it came out, I kept telling people there's so many Star Wars references and Labyrinth references and references to D20. There's references all over the place. And so if you're the kind of person who just loves Easter eggs, this book is absolutely for you because it's just full of them.
And I'll bet it was fun to write. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
Oh, and I love Addie. I think she's, I had, a friend read it and said that of all my main characters, Addie is probably the most like me. And I think there's something to that. Like, I hadn't really thought of it, while I was writing it, but just, she's an English major. She's an English professor and loves books and loves references and loves people, and loves the stories that come out when you get a bunch of people together.
So, yeah. Okay. Well, I will keep that in mind then. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but that I can see that makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, we'll change gears just a little bit. And who would you say or have been some of the most influential writers for you? I mean, as you were growing up, people that made you say, okay, I would like to do what they do. I'm going to do it my way, but I would like to do something like what they're doing.
Yeah. Ray Bradbury and Robin McKinley.
That's a great combination. Yeah.
They're the two writers who made me want to be a writer. And Ray Bradbury, because his prose and his descriptions are so good and so immersive, and it was magic to me. I'd read his books, and you can smell them, you can taste them, there's a chapter in Dandelion Wine where he talks about buying sneakers for the school year. Summer's over, you have to go and you have to get your shoes so that you can start school again. And he walks into the shoe store, and I don't know if you have ever had that kind of rubbery scent on the back of your tongue when you walk into like an athletic shoe store, and like the rubber from the soles and things like that. Like I know what that smells like at the back of my throat. I smelled that reading that story. Like, I'm reading that story and I get that feeling in the back of my throat. And it's like, how do you do that? How do you make somebody smell something just with words on the page? So I wanted to learn how to do that. And so that's Ray Bradbury. And Robin McKinley, I love her characters. I love her characters so much. I want to hang out with them. They're so genuine in a way. I guess they're not over the top. They're not unrealistic. They're in very heroic situations, but they're so down to earth and they're so relatable. They don't come across as these big otherworldly, heroic characters, but they're still heroes. And that's the kind of character I wanted to write about, heroes who are heroes because they just happen to be in the right place at the right time, not because of any essential nature on their parts, because that's what heroes are in the real world, right? They're the people who they're in the right place at the right time, and then they step up and do the right thing. Right. They're not, we all have the potential to be heroes if we just step up and do the right thing. So
did you ever get to meet either of them in person?
I met Ray Bradbury. I have a book signed by him. Yeah, I'm very lucky. Like I met him once at a book signing, but I did get to see him speak on several occasions, various conventions and things like that he spoke at. I have not yet met Robin McKinley. I actually, the last time that she was a guest of honor at a convention in the US, because she lives in Britain, but she was scheduled to be guest of honor. And so I immediately went to that convention. I signed up. It was in Boston. So it was on the other side of the country from me. And I'm still just I am going to be there so that I can meet Robin McKinley. And then she had to cancel. Unfortunately, she had to cancel at the last minute. So she was not able to be there. And I don't think she's come to the US for a convention since then. So I'm keeping my eyes open. We'll see.
Yeah, you never know. Or then maybe it'll give you a good excuse to go back to England, right?
Well, yeah, if I were a little more outgoing and extroverted, I would, the next time I go to England, I would see if I could take her out to coffee or something, and try. Yeah, I don't know. At that point, it starts to get a little weird. So,
well, that's true. She might not. She do. And you never know if it's not someone you've ever met personally. You don't know how they might react to something like that.
Yeah, like I said, if I were braver. Yeah. But I think that's one of the great things about conventions is that it does give you a chance to meet people in a very kind of controlled, formal setting. Like this is a setting where you're supposed to go meet these people. So it's not weird the way it would be, if I just showed up.
Right. Just out of nowhere. It's not like you're knocking on her front door.
Yeah, that would be super dodgy. So I'm not planning on doing that.
So if anybody does that, it wasn't you. Everybody's heard it.
It wasn't me. No.
Did not do this. Now, for kind of a craft-oriented question, I guess and you always have a playlist for your Kitty books, and but I'm curious: do you always prefer, or do you always like to have background music or some kind of background sound when you write, or do you sometimes prefer, just to have silence, or do you vary in how you approach that?
I almost always have music. I'm almost always listening to something because silence gets distracting. I know that's going to sound kind of weird, but the way I've always put it is, I'm a pretty type A anxious personality. So there's a part of my brain that's always worried about things, and is always did I turn the stove off? Should I be doing laundry? Maybe I should go check the mail. Maybe I should do this. And if I put on music, that voice goes away. That voice is I'm listening to music now. This is okay. I'm not worried anymore. So I listen to music so that I can distract that part of my brain that's always kind of telling me I should be doing something else. So it's very important actually for me to have music while I'm writing.
Okay, and that question gets answered differently by just about everybody. Are people
isn't it so interesting? I've talked to a lot of people a lot of writers who listen to soundtracks. Soundtracks are very popular to listen to, and then some writers who can't listen to music with words at all because the words are distracting. And I'm not like that. A lot of times I'll pick music that fits what I'm writing. So if I'm writing something historical, I'll try to find the music from that period to set the mood. If I'm writing World War II stories, I listen to a lot of swing music, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Lately, I've been listening to a lot of ambient, just Brian Eno kind of electronica, because it's very soothing. I listen to just about everything, depending on what I'm writing.
Yeah, and that's obvious from the playlist that you do provide for us, and I looked at it wow, that's quite a variety. And that's actually that right now you're listening to Ambient is actually a very good segue into my last question,
Okay.
which is there anything that you can share with us that you're able to tell us about what we can look for next from you?
Yeah, that's a big question. I knew you were going to ask that. So I was thinking about what I was going to say, because I'm not under contract right now. So in some ways it's good because I can work on whatever I want to, but in some ways it's bad because I don't have a lot of direction right now. I'm working on a lot of different things. But I will tell you, so the Cormick and Amelia novellas, I've done 4 of them. They're only in ebook right now. But the thing I want to do for this year is I'm going to do a print omnibus. So I'm going to bring all 4 of them together and have a print version for people who want the print version, because I talk to a lot of people who don't read ebooks at all, and they want to read them. So yeah, that's my project for this year, is I'm going to pull those novellas into an omnibus. I've written a short story to kind of link them all together. Like, this is an old concept in science fiction, is the fix-it novel, where somebody would take a bunch of related short stories and then write connective tissue between them. So I've done that. I've written that story.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Which, yeah, once again, it kind of blows the door open and introduces a bunch of new threads that I'm going to have to do something with. But yeah, I definitely want to write more Cormick and Amelia stories, because I'm having a good time with them and people seem to enjoy them. Apart from that, I'm working on a couple of novellas, science fiction, space opera novellas.
Oh, okay.
I've had a couple of short stories on Tor.com. The first one is called Sinew and Steel and What They Told. And the main character of that one, I love him and want to write more about him. So I'm doing that. I'm writing a novella about him, and we'll see where it ends up. I'm working on a fantasy novel set in the Neolithic period in Neolithic Ireland. Wow. This is the culture that built Newgrange and Stonehenge, that kind of thing. But yeah, so I'm working on a lot of stuff, and unfortunately, I can't tell you when any of it's going to be available, because it's kind of up in the air right now.
But at least we have an idea of what's coming, so that's great. That some more things to look forward to, and certainly for anyone who watches this interview, there are a lot of things that you've written. That, I mean, we talked about the novels primarily, and then and the novellas, but there are certainly. You've written so many wild card stories and short stories for other publications.
We talk about wild cards.
Yeah, and so there are a number of ways that people can, or places that people can seek out other works by you to keep them busy until until you have your next big announcement anyway. But that's great that about the novella omnibus for Cormick and Amelia. So, which I would also like to add is a fascinating concept to begin with, that the whole two-souled individual and all of that. So that's pretty amazing, the way that you've worked it out, I think. So congratulations on that as well. I think it's done very effectively, especially because you would never think that those two people would have, but they complement each other, so it makes sense, but in any case, they've been a lot of fun to read about. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That's like one of the threads, one of the many threads I introduced that I've actually been able to do a lot with. So I'm pleased about that.
And, thank you in general for being here today. I know there are a lot of folks very excited about this, that are, that will be seeing this interview, that they were so pleased to hear that it was coming. I try to give people a little bit of advance notice, but not too much, because then otherwise they'd be sending me messages at the track page. When did you say this was coming? I mean, I don't tell them like 2 or 3 months ahead of time, I'll be like, okay, give them a few weeks, and then that's enough to build up the anticipation. But I do appreciate it so much. Hopefully we will, and I hope that we will see you again in person at Dragon Con, because it was a pleasure to have you there. since the format. I know you were there prior to the
Mhm.
urban fantasy track, but we did get to have you one time on the track, and I hope that that will happen again. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes, it's been great, and thank you for all of the wonderful things that you have written, all the great stories you have given us. And as a reader, I appreciate it very much, as do all of our viewers, I'm quite sure.
Well, thank you so much.
So please come see us soon, and thanks everyone for watching. And if there are any of Carrie's things that you haven't read yet, whether they're full-length novels, novellas, or short stories, you now know that there are plenty of them. And on your website, there's a very extensive list of, I think, everything that she has written. So you can go and have fun.
There's a lot.
Yes, there is a lot. There really is. So thank you so much, Carrie. I really appreciate it, as do all of our anybody associated with the track appreciates it. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Carol.
Yes.